Hello everyone, I'm Bob Keyser. This is the Son of Man Urantia Project, spreading the knowledge of the fatherhood of God, the siblinghood of humanity, and our commandment to treat others as God would have us do, all free from ties to any faith or political ideology. Today, we explore Chapter 1, Birth and Infancy of Jesus, from the Son of Man Urantia, the life and teachings of Jesus from the Urantia book. Grab your copy on Amazon, hit like and subscribe, and then marvel at the most thrilling story to ever unfold in the cosmos. Chapter 1, Birth and Infancy of Jesus. Mary and Joseph choosing the parents. Upon Michael's choice of Urantia for his final bestowal to serve the Father's will, Gabriel selected the Jews to foster the Creator's earthly mission. At the time, their faith and philosophy reflected greater truth than those of other cultures. Next, his staff searched for worthy parents among the Hebrews, the descendants of Abraham, and eventually nominated 3 couples. Gabriel chose Mary and Joseph. Physically, they were robust and vital, and socially, they held enough status to enable Jesus to fulfill his sacred destiny. Joseph was a deeply faithful Jew. His father's family line traced to Abraham and beyond, but not quite all the way back to Adam. His most recent ancestors came from the trades: masons, carpenters, blacksmiths, and others. Joseph began as a carpenter and then later contracted his own jobs. Mary's lineage also went back into the depths of antiquity, and it was one of the most distinguished among the Jews. Her line was a blend of numerous tribes and included some of the most important women in Earth's history, including Eve. Gabriel appears to Elizabeth. Mary had a distant relative named Elizabeth, whose husband was Zacharias, a Jewish rabbi. They had been married for many years, but had never been blessed with a child. One day, towards the end of June 8 BC, while Zacharias was praying in the temple, Elizabeth was by herself in their house, when suddenly Gabriel manifested before her. After Elizabeth calmed down, Gabriel told her that the long-awaited deliverer would soon arrive, that Elizabeth's cousin, Mary, would be the mother of this divine teacher, that one named John would come first to prepare the way for this deliverer, that Elizabeth and her husband Zacharias would be the parents of John, who would be known as John the Baptist, and finally, that he was going to tell Mary this same story. Elizabeth was uncertain how to proceed. It took her 5 months before she even told her husband, and at first Zacharias did not believe her. But when Elizabeth realized she was pregnant, that transformed their perspective. Furthermore, Zacharias trusted Elizabeth. He did not think she was lying, so he was forced to at least contemplate the truth that perhaps she had seen an angel. Then, 6 weeks before John was born, Zacharias had a dream that convinced him of everything. No one knows if this dream was just Zacharias' mind wandering or if an angel came to him. But in the morning, he believed Elizabeth's story and accepted that they were going to be the parents of a herald of the deliverer. On March 25th, 7 BC, John was born in a city of Judah. Elizabeth and Zacharias were joyful and honored. Their dream had been fulfilled. 8 days later, they took their newborn to the temple, and according to Jewish law, he was circumcised. They named their son John, as Gabriel had instructed. From birth, Zacharias and Elizabeth began instilling in John his sacred purpose. He was raised knowing he would become a great herald who prepared people for the coming of someone surpassing himself. John embraced his sacred duty, and spent much of his childhood at the temple when his father was teaching. Gabriel's announcement to Mary. Mary was at home, and Joseph was still at work when Gabriel appeared to her in mid-November. After Mary calmed down, Gabriel told her what he had told Elizabeth, that she was pregnant with a son, that her pregnancy was divinely ordained, that she and Joseph were to name their son Joshua, and that their son would proclaim the kingdom of heaven. Gabriel warned Mary not to tell anyone except Joseph and Elizabeth about his visit. He told her to trust unwaveringly, that God would make her strong, and that he, Gabriel, would watch over their household. Then he vanished. As with Elizabeth, Mary was perplexed by her encounter. Then she, too, realized that she was pregnant. Mary told Joseph about Gabriel's visit, and then left for 3 weeks to stay with Elizabeth and Zacharias, roughly 4 miles from Mary and Joseph's house in Nazareth. After the two women compared stories, Mary became more convinced that she had in fact been visited by an angel. Joseph, like Zacharias, had great faith in his wife, but the story was hard to accept. He spent many sleepless nights before finally believing Mary. When he did, that presented a profound mystery. How could two humans have a baby that was supposed to be divine? They pondered their secret for weeks and finally decided that it was true. Neither of them knew how, but they had been selected by God to be the parents of the promised deliverer. Gabriel appeared to Mary only after her conception. No virgin birth occurred, his visit being the sole celestial visitation. Joseph's dream. It was also a dream that convinced Joseph to believe Mary's story. In it, a celestial messenger disclosed that his son would herald the light of God to the world. The angel said his son's own people, the Jews, would reject him, but the Gentiles would embrace and honor him. For the people who did accept him, Joseph's son would bring a higher revelation of God the Father through his life's example. The angel never told Joseph that his son was coming to save the Jews, or that Joseph was a descendant of the house of David. For hundreds of years, the Jews had been waiting for someone to come and ascend David's throne. This new king, like Moses, would use miracles to defeat the Jews' enemies and control all of Palestine. After Jesus was crucified, many of the stories in the Old Testament were altered to align with his bestowal. Those changes have caused much misunderstanding. Jesus himself stated that he had no link to the family of David or any intention to sit on his throne. Other changes to the scriptures included altering Mary's and Joseph's family lines and stating that a virgin instead of a maiden was going to bear a son. Jesus' mortal parents. Joseph had dark hair and dark eyes. He was the kind of reserved, contemplative man known for deep reflection. He was pious and always concerned for the welfare of others. At the same time, he was human and had times of discouragement and wrestled with doubt. Mary was just the opposite. She had blonde hair and brown eyes and was the type of person who was ever joyful and spirited, rarely yielding to despair. At least that was the case throughout Jesus' childhood. Later, when Jesus began his mission and the problems with the Jews and the Romans started, she became quieter and more reserved. Still, throughout all of the chaos, Mary showed strength, kept her composure, and was an exemplary mother for Jesus and his siblings. Jesus carried traits from both of his parents. From Joseph, he acquired his deep empathy for humankind and some of his periodic despondency. Joseph also taught Jesus the history of the Jewish people and the laws governing their religion. Mary's personality was stronger than Joseph's. She was outgoing and bold in expressing herself. Mary was better at managing a household than most women, and she was a master at completing her tasks. From her, Jesus learned how to plan, teach, and adapt. But Mary could also get angry on the spot if someone blasphemed God, a trait Jesus acquired from her later in life. One day, young Joseph was working for Mary's father, building an addition to his home. Under the warm Nazareth sun, Mary stepped outside during the lunch break and offered Joseph a cold glass of water, and there their bond began to form. 2 years later, at 21, Joseph married Mary. With his brother's help, Joseph built a small home for them in Nazareth, where Gabriel would later visit her. The home in Nazareth. Jesus' childhood home was on the northern edge of Nazareth. It was near gentle hills that Jesus would climb when he was playing in the countryside. The house was made of stone with one open room and a flat roof. Next to it was a small hut for the animals. There were sparse furnishings, just some stools, a stone table, an olive oil lamp for light, and Mary's loom for making cloth to sew their clothes. At night, the family slept on mats on the dirt floor. Outside and behind the house was the millstone. When Jesus was young, he would pour in the wheat, while Mary turned the grinder to crush it into flour. As Mary and Joseph's family grew, they built additions onto the house. The trip to Bethlehem. Mary and Joseph were married in March 8 BC. That same month, Caesar Augustus passed a law requiring a census. He desired to ascertain how many people were paying taxes. But the Jews had always resented being counted, and they managed to have the census in Palestine delayed until a year later, in 7 BC. Mary was pregnant that year when the Romans held the census in Palestine, so Joseph decided that he would go to Bethlehem and register the family by himself. Mary insisted. She did not want to take the chance of giving birth when Joseph was gone. Also, her cousin Elizabeth lived nearby Bethlehem, and Mary argued that the two of them could visit. At first, Joseph held firm and said Mary had to stay home. But she just ignored him and packed enough food for both of them, triumphing. They left for Bethlehem at dawn the next day, August 18th, 7 BC. Mary rode the donkey with their food, and Joseph walked ahead, leading the way. The first night, they camped by the Jordan River. The second night was spent in Jericho, and toward the end of the third day, they walked into Bethlehem. The city was overcrowded with people, and there were no rooms in any of the lodges. Finally, an innkeeper prepared his stables to make room for more guests, and Mary and Joseph settled into what was normally the granary, just in front of the stalls and mangers. For added privacy, they hung tent curtains and then sought rest. Jesus is born. Neither Mary nor Joseph slept much that night. By morning, Mary sensed her delivery was imminent. At noon, August 21st, 7 BC, with the help of other women at the inn, Jesus was born. The next day, Joseph registered the family for the census. He found a man willing to give up his room at the inn for Mary and the baby, and they stayed there for the next 3 weeks. The third day, Mary sent a message to Elizabeth, and the two of them made plans to visit a week later. According to Jewish custom, on the 8th day, Jesus was taken to the temple, circumcised, and given the name Joshua, or Jesus. Mary, Elizabeth, and Zacharias were convinced that Jesus was destined as the King of the Jews to sit on David's throne. They also thought that little John, Elizabeth and Zacharias' son, would be Jesus' herald. Since they were already in Bethlehem, and since Bethlehem was actually the city of David, the three of them managed to convince Joseph that they should all live there. Joseph agreed, and to support them, he labored as a carpenter. While it is true that the angels in heaven sang at Jesus' birth, no one on earth heard them. 3 weeks later, Zacharias met several priests traveling together. Many years before, these priests had met a mysterious seer who told them that he had dreamt about a prophet who was going to be born to the Jews in a faraway land. He said this man would grow up to become the light of life for all of the world. When the priests told this to Zacharias, he of course thought about Jesus and told the priests what he knew. The priests then went and met Mary, saw Jesus, and left some gifts before heading home. There was nothing supernatural about these events. The tale about a star guiding the priests to Bethlehem was added later and resulted from a strange but natural alignment of the planets, in particular Saturn and Jupiter. Even more amazing, this alignment occurred 3 times the year Jesus was born: May 29th, September 29th, and December 5th. While no miracles happened, back then it was normal for people to embellish stories with them. Later, these stories were written down and people assumed them to be true. The presentation in the temple. Jewish parents were required to present newborns to the priests at the temple, and Mary was forced to undergo the cleansing rituals like all other women. The fee charged for these supposed blessings was 5 shekels. Mary and Joseph bundled up Jesus, took him to the temple, and stood in line with the other parents and their new babies. Zacharias knew that Mary and Joseph were going to the temple to present Jesus. He believed that Jesus was a special child, and he yearned to herald the fact to the people. There was a poet couple who were always in the temple, and after Zacharias told them his beliefs about Jesus' divinity, the 3 of them made a plan to announce that news to everyone else. The couple wrote a lengthy poem and hid in the crowd, waiting for Zacharias to signal them that Mary, Joseph, and Jesus were passing by. When the 2 of them sang forth, the people were astonished, and Mary and Joseph were shocked. They were not happy that their secret was now made public. Herod acts. Palestine was ruled by Herod the Idumean. He had been put in charge by the Caesar in Rome, and he maintained favor with that far-off ruler. But in Palestine, the Jews did not trust him. There had always been tension between them, so to keep his power, Herod had informants reporting to him from all across his land. Herod knew that the Jews had been praying for a deliverer to set them free from the Romans' rule. After his spies told him about the priest who came to Bethlehem looking for this same person, he had them brought to his court for questioning. They were not much help and could only tell him that a man and woman who had gone to Bethlehem to register for the census had been blessed with a male child. Herod did not believe these men, so he tried to trick them by saying that he, too, wanted to honor this special child. And he gave them money to find Jesus and report back. But the priests were on to Herod's trick and took his money and returned to their country far away. Then Herod's spies told him about the excitement in the temple when the poem was sung for someone's newborn child, and Herod knew he faced a threat. He decided that he had to find this baby boy and quell any notion that a new king of the Jews had been born. Zacharias also had his own spies. When he was informed that Herod was searching for Mary, Joseph, and the newborn Jesus, those three sought refuge in Bethlehem, while Zacharias and Elizabeth returned to their home. All stayed out of sight for more than a year. Herod finally became vexed by his search for the baby Jesus and ordered that all boys under 2 years old be killed, just in case this child was still in Bethlehem. Again, Zacharias' spies warned him, and Mary and Joseph escaped Herod's assassins just in time. Sadly, 16 other infant boys did not and were slaughtered the next day. The family made their way to Alexandria in Egypt and hid for 2 years. It was not until Herod died that Mary and Joseph deemed it safe to take Jesus back to Bethlehem. Okay, folks, that was chapter 1, Birth and Infancy of Jesus. Up next is chapter 2, Jesus' early childhood, from the Son of Man, Urantia, the life and teachings of Jesus from the Urantia book. Grab your copy on Amazon, hit that like and subscribe, and then let's all get out there and serve humanity for nothing more or less than the sake of God. Bobby Keyser, out here.